Hello and welcome to The Road Ahead. I'm Jeff Pack, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Senior Services, and we have two very special guests with us here today from the Department of Human Services, Bureau for Social Services, and we have Jennifer Goer and Michelle Angus, who are social service policy specialists within the Adult Services Unit at BSS. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what you all do first.
So what Michelle and I do as policy specialists, we fall, again, under the Bureau for Social Services. We help to create the policy. When legislature changes certain things, we then change the policy to match the West Virginia Code and what's offered there. And then we also just provide support to field staff and in any way that we can. And can you think of anything else? A lot of behind-the-scenes work.
Okay, and you all exist completely within the adult services area of concentration, or?
So Michelle and I, as policy specialists, are specifically with the adult services side.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So talk about some of the services that are available, or some of the things that adult services do across the state.
So primarily, our biggest thing that we do is to investigate abuse, neglect, including self-neglect, and financial exploitation for vulnerable adults, and then provide the least restrictive intervention that's available. That's the biggest part, but we also have substitute decision-making services. So from there, we look at guardianships and healthcare surrogates, and we can serve as a last resort in those cases when, say, a physician decides that a person no longer has decision-making capacity for medical needs. There's a hierarchy there, and if someone is not willing, able, or appropriate to serve as that surrogate decision maker, then the department can be appointed. And then we also have the guardianship side, where the court determines if a person is considered a protected person. And again, it's the last resort the department can serve to assist someone with those decisions. And then we have our adult residential services, and that's where we can subsidize cost of care for those clients that are going into assisted living facilities or adult family care homes if their income isn't sufficient to cover the full cost. We have homeless services. That's where we collaborate with the West Virginia Coalition to End Homelessness, and we do that throughout the state for anyone that's experiencing homelessness. And we have our unclaimed deceased adult body program, where if someone has passed away and the medical examiner has not been able to locate anyone to take claim and control of the body, they contact us, and then we can assist with that. If we can't find anyone, then we reach out to local funeral homes who are willing to take over and just give the proper burial that someone deserves once they pass.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. So let's start with adult family care. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, the Adult Family Care Program, they're providers throughout the state that are licensed to take in I think at the most 3 individuals, that they take them into their home. They take them into their home, make them, they end up being more like family instead of clients, patients. They're allowed to do overnights with these providers before they go in to make sure that it's a good fit. Most of our providers have had their individuals for 20, 30 years.
Okay. How does someone that's interested in becoming an AFC provider, where could they go to find out more information about that?
They could contact the home finders, the Adult Family Care home finders, which there are 2 of them housed out of the Lewis County Department of Human Services. So they would contact that office and ask to speak to the home finders.
All right. Is there a great need for additional AFC homes across the state? Is there a shortage currently?
Absolutely. We currently have a media campaign that's going on. Hopefully people have seen those commercials, and actually one of the providers within that commercial, she is one of our adult family care providers, and Michelle has worked with her for years out of the Monongalia County area. And what's really special about her is that she grew up in adult family care. Her mom is also an adult family care provider,
wow.
So she's seen that firsthand.
Okay. So let's move on a little bit. Another thing that you mentioned was Adult Protective Services and investigating I believe you said abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation.
Yes.
Who would qualify as a vulnerable adult?
So there are 3 criteria that need to be met in order for an investigation to be assigned. Specifically, a vulnerable adult is someone that's 18 years of age or older, and they're going to have a mental or physical condition that's going to prevent them from being able to carry on their activities of daily living independently, to be able to sustain their health and safety. So in order for an investigation to be assigned, you would need to be 18 years of age or older, or an emancipated minor, so you need to be an adult. You need to be considered a vulnerable adult, meet the definition, or you could be a facility resident, and then there needs to be a report of an allegation of the abuse, potential abuse, neglect, including self-neglect and financial exploitation.
What would be an example of self-neglect?
So self-neglect, I would say, maybe it's someone who is usually very well kept. They've always taken very, very much pride in their appearance, but suddenly their hygiene is a lot more poor. They might appear to be confused, maybe not taking their medications like they used to be. Maybe that's potentially a sign of some mental impairment that might be happening. It could be someone, really anyone, that maybe was going to the doctor for quite some time, and now suddenly we're forgetting things a lot more. We're having to reschedule appointments or cancel appointments for things. Maybe just they're no longer able to care for themselves in their homes. There's just a lot of different potential warning signs out there.
Okay. And if someone suspects abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation, what is the appropriate mechanism for reporting that?
So you want to call our centralized intake number. That's 1-800-352-6513. And that's the same for adult protective services as it is for child protective services. But you're going to call, that's a 24-hour-a-day hotline where someone is there to take down that information. And you really want to make sure that you give them as much information as you can in order to make sure that we have everything we can to show that we can accept that intake and then assign that for investigation. And that in turn helps the staff that go out there to know what's going on.
Okay.
It's a good starting point.
Okay. Do you have any idea on average how many of those allegations are received and investigated? If you don't know, that's okay.
I believe in September, I believe it was over 1,400 vulnerable adults were reported. I'm not exactly sure how many were accepted, but
Okay.
at least over 1,400 were reported.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes, and it appears there's an intake each month, about 400 each month. It just keeps rising. But we also recently did a media campaign for APS as well, for people to be able to report and really get that number out there.
So what are some things that folks should look for in terms of financial exploitation?
So some things for financial exploitation would be unexplained charges on someone's bank accounts.
Unpaid bills. If suddenly their electric's being turned off, but they have this income, so where is that going? Also, I would say if their normal banking practice is to go into the bank, and now suddenly somebody's coming along with them, and they're withdrawing large amounts of money each time this person comes in, and maybe this person is also kind of guiding the conversation with it, that's a potential warning sign as well. If someone normally doesn't use the ATM machine, but now there's all of these withdrawals, transactions being made, and really no one's able to explain where that money is going or what that's being used for, those are all also other red flags to look for.
Okay. And those also would be reported through the centralized intake?
Yes, it's all
hotline?
reported through that same number.
All right. So talk a little bit about, if you would, guardianships and healthcare surrogacy, and how you arrive at the point of needing that, and what the process is for obtaining that.
So a healthcare surrogate is a physician-appointed medical decision maker, where if there's no family members or friends available, and a person's in a hospital or lacks capacity, then they would need someone to step in and make decisions for them. That could be everyday decisions, medical decisions, life or death decisions. So a physician would appoint someone within adult services to potentially become a decision maker if there's no one on the hierarchy, such as a spouse, adult child, friends, any other family members. We are last resort to be appointed as healthcare surrogate.
Okay. And what about guardians?
Guardian's a little different. It's a little more extensive.
Okay.
So while a physician or a nurse practitioner can determine capacity for medical decisions, only a court can determine competency. So if someone has been deemed by a mental impairment to no longer be able to fully understand and execute regular everyday decisions, anything other than just the healthcare decisions, we would go potentially the guardianship route. So what happens there is a petition has to be filed in the county in which the client lives. Along with the petition is your evaluation of a licensed physician or psychologist. This is a specific form that has to be filled out to really show why this person lacks this capacity and they're no longer able to make these decisions. You also have a statement of financial resources that needs to be completed when you're requesting that maybe a conservator be appointed as well. Just to throw out there, the department is never considered a conservator. That's kind of a conflict of issue with us. So as a last resort, the local sheriff could be appointed as a conservator if that's needed. If the client is not able to make the court hearing for whatever physical reason they might have, or maybe because of a mental reason that they might not be able, say they're bedbound and they're not able to get out. The physician can complete a form called an affidavit of physician, and that can be turned in as well, and so that the court knows this is why the protected person is not going to be able to be there today. And then a court hearing is set. We're kind of at the mercy of the court as to when they set that, but it is typically once it's been filed, they have 60 days to hear that, and they can hear all sides. Again, the department is just appointed as a guardian. It's last resort. So if there's someone that's willing, appropriate, and able, they're going to be appointed as opposed to the department. So that's kind of how that works.
So an APS worker could be appointed as the guardian, provided that there were no other options available.
Yes, so the Department of Human Services would be who they would put on the form,
Right.
but it would be assigned to an APS worker to cover, yes.
Okay. Competency, is that a permanent situation, or might someone regain their competency?
It does not have to be a permanent situation, and in many instances it is. However, I was in the field for over 20 years and actually had a couple that did regain the ability to make their own decisions based off of the help and the support that we were able to provide them. So at that point, the department and APS were always looking to do the least restrictive level, the least restrictive intervention. And when you're a guardian for someone, that's taking away a lot of their basic rights. So we're still talking with them and what their wishes are, but we're doing everything in their best wishes with them. But when they're able to start doing those things again on their own, we can have them reevaluated, and then that can potentially be turned into maybe a limited guardianship where there's just certain types of decisions that a guardian could help make, or they could regain total capacity and competency at that point, and the court could overturn that guardianship and they could be their own guardian again.
Okay. You mentioned that you personally had seen a couple regain their competency through the supplying of services. What might some of those services look like?
So in particular, in the situations that I had, these people, they had services that were 24/7. They didn't have that before we had come in, but 24/7 care and supervision where in the IDD waiver setting. So they had staff with them 24 hours a day, helping them to gain more of their independent living skills back, things that they really didn't know how to do to begin with. But as they continued to work with them over the course of a few years, they started understanding things better and being able to do things more on their own. So that, making sure they were getting to their doctor's appointments, taking their medications appropriately, because they weren't doing that in the beginning. So once all of those things, kind of lined up, it got to the point where we realized just how much this person was thriving, and we were able to step back. And we take baby steps when we do this. We don't want to just get in there and then get right back out and leave them in a situation where they have no help whatsoever.
Right.
This person specifically still has the waiver services, still have people coming into the home, still doing these things. It's just now this person is able to make these decisions again for themselves. And I believe in the situation that I'm talking to, we were able to go back and just be a healthcare surrogate at that point, because that was a least restrictive level as opposed to the guardianship. They still needed some help with their medical decisions and healthcare decisions, and we stayed on as that, but we no longer needed the full guardianship.
So how do you, in terms of healthcare surrogacy, how do you balance the wishes of the client versus the best interest of the client?
I think that depends on the individual. It's a case-by-case basis with the individuals. Some individuals are able to attend their doctor's appointments with the worker and able to express their wishes to the doctor, but may not understand the full extent of certain procedures, like maybe a major surgery, or if, chemotherapy. They may not understand the complications that come with those type of decisions. And then there's some individuals that aren't able to make any decisions, that we just try to go the best that we can based on knowing the individual.
We can also check with if there are family members or other people that have known them for quite some time but just aren't comfortable with accepting that role. We like to speak to them as well, just to try to get an idea if they knew what their wishes would be. And if there's an advance directive out there, we're going to follow that advance directive until that could interfere potentially with what's in the best interest of the client. And ultimately, we don't take these decisions very lightly by any means. We've made a lot of life-changing decisions in the course of Michelle and I's tenure, just the two of us. And we meet with the staff that they may have. We meet with physicians. We have ethics consults, both internally, and then if they're like in a hospital type setting, we can meet with the doctors and have an ethics consult there. If we're looking to make major life decisions, we're not going to just make that on our own. We're going to get the whole view from the entire care plan team to see what the best step is that's going to really take care of this individual, keep them safe, keep them just safe and doing what we think that they would want to be done, or what we would want someone to do in our best interest if we couldn't act that way either.
Okay. So let's switch gears just a little bit. You all, how long have you been at the department?
Almost 22 years.
Almost 22 years, Michelle?
Almost 23.
Almost 23. So have you always worked exclusively in adult services?
I started in income maintenance doing food stamp applications and Medicaid applications. I was there for maybe a year and a half. And from there, I went into APS and have been doing APS ever since, until almost 2 years ago when I came into policy.
Okay.
I've done a little bit of everything, from
Okay.
food stamp employment and training to income maintenance to West Virginia Works before I came over to Adult Protective Services.
Okay. How long were you in adult protective services?
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. Okay. What is, this is for both of you, what's your favorite part of your job?
The people that you get to work with. When I was in the field, the ability to really get to know your clients, to know the individuals you serve. For the most part of my tenure, I was an ongoing worker. So I handled a lot of the healthcare surrogates, the guardianships, and some of the clients that I had for almost 20 years. So they become a lot like family in ways. But I think just being able to be a support for them, to be someone for them, a voice for them that they might not be able to have on their own, but to be able to stand up with them and then just help make their life better the best that we can. I think that's been the most rewarding. And then in this position, it's, like I said, it's more behind the scenes, but knowing that we're still able to make a difference, whether that be with the staff that are still in the field and being supportive for them so they can in turn be the best that they can be for the individuals, I think that's been the most rewarding.
I would agree with a lot of what Jennifer said. And most,
You
a lot
should
of
have
mine
went
was-
first, so you could
Sorry.
A lot of mine was nursing home clients. I
Okay.
really enjoyed going and spending time with the nursing home clients or our assisted living clients because a lot of them don't have family or anyone to come visit. So they would really enjoy, the one person that might be there to come see them,
Absolutely.
especially around the holidays when they really have no one.
Sure.
Do you all do any sort of outreach to local senior centers in the counties or go out and do presentations about these services that you've talked about today and how those might be of benefit to folks?
Sure. Michelle and I just started doing presentations together in the last 3 months, so we can come do a presentation to anyone that wants any provider, any facility, anything like that we can do. We just ask that you reach out to us, and we're happy to come offer what we can. You just tell us what we need, and we can do that for you.
Okay. So back to the previous question. You both have spent a significant amount of time in the field. So without revealing specifics, what's one thing that when you retire, you'll look back and say, this is the thing I'm most proud of?
Okay. You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Now see, it doesn't help you now because you can't steal from her.
So I had one individual years ago who I went to every doctor's appointment with. Their ultimate goal was to try to get back to their family who they had lost contact with because of medical issues over the years, family history, whatever had went on in that individual's life. I worked very hard to work with this individual before we were finally able to get them back to an assisted living near where they thought their kids lived. But I would say that was one of mine because that person was a very special individual to me.
That was great. Good job. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about mine.
All right, let's hear it.
I had a client who loved Disney princesses, and had a spin down that they needed to meet in order to be able to keep their services. So we came up with the idea that we would get them to Disney World.
Wow.
They had the money. They were going to Disney World. Just so happens my family and I were making our first trip to Disney World at the same time. So I was like, hey, I'm going to give you permission to take this person to Disney World, but the stipulation is I'm going to be down there too. Can you please take them at the same time I'm going to be there? Because I think this would be really awesome to get to do something outside of the norm that I'll probably never be able to get to do again. I would love to be able to make this happen. So they scheduled it for the same time that I was going, and I was on vacation. I was not on the clock by any means for this. But one particular day, we got to meet up, this person and their staff, and we got to meet up at the Magic Kingdom. And we got to ride the Pirates of the Caribbean together. And this was the very first time this person had ever got to ride anything. And this person also was mostly nonverbal. There was only a couple things that this person could say. So we get into the boat, and we're going in the dark along the thing, and they grabbed my hand. And then the next thing, I'm going to cry. Then the next thing that I heard was, oh, wow. And throughout this whole trip, all I heard was wow. And this person had never said wow before. This was a brand new word to them. So I get out of the boat, I'm bawling like a baby. And the staff is there crying too. Like, it was such an awesome moment. And unfortunately, a couple years after that, this person passed away.
Oh.
But they had the best day. Like, they went and did the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, and this person, she was all dressed like a princess. It was awesome. But at her funeral, they had a picture up front of me as her guardian with her and the staff. And there were pictures that day from the very best day when she got to do that. And I still have those pictures in frames. They gave those to me. You can't beat things like that, right? Like, that's just, man, I'm hormonal, I'm sorry. Those are just amazing times that I'll never forget, and was probably more special for me than for her. But to see that and to get to hear her say a word that she'd never said before, and just to get to be a part of that and know that that was just a great time for her. I was truly truly blessed to be able to get to do that with her.
That's wonderful. Thank you both for sharing that. If we could, let's go back briefly to adult family care. So would it be safe to assume that adult family care would be an option that would be supportive and protective, yet perhaps a level of care lower than assisted living and then beyond nursing homes? So it does provide the opportunity for people to maintain some independence and remaining within their community. Talk about the importance of that.
I would say there's a lot more independence with adult family care than assisted living. The adult family care providers that we've dealt with, especially in the Morgantown, Fairmont area, they've provided a lot of independence for those individuals. We had one individual that would go to church, every Sunday without their provider. So they were still able to do very independent things without being under the structure of an assisted living. It's basically like living in your home. You just have that supportive care of someone living there with you to help make sure you have all your needs met.
Right.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how many more AFC providers you would need across the state to meet the current need as it exists? And do you anticipate that need to grow or remain the same or decrease?
I would say when the program started, I believe back in the 70s, and at its peak, we had over 600 providers statewide.
Okay.
We are now down to 100 or just under that.
Oh, wow.
The amount of individuals that we're seeing come through needing our services is growing exponentially. It just is. And so the more providers that we would be able to get, the better off this is. Because if this level of care is taken away, then really the next thing up from living independently is to be into assisted living. So this is definitely a way to keep that program going and keep these at the least restrictive level possible.
Okay. Well, you all have provided an amazing amount of information here today, so thank you for that. And I thank you for coming and joining us. It's been wonderful to get to sit and visit with you all, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure. And thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again next time on The Road Ahead.